The heavy cream envelope sat on William Lancaster's glass desk like a taunt, its gold-embossed lettering catching the late afternoon light. He had recognized the handwriting before he even opened it, the smooth loops that once signed love letters, now sealing an invitation to watch her marry someone else. Olivia Harrington, the woman who had walked out of his life without warning, without reason, and apparently without looking back. He broke the seal with deliberate slowness, scanning the elegant script inside. The words were polite, almost warm, but he could read the truth beneath them. She wanted him to see her smiling in another man's arms. She wanted him to know she had won. He leaned back in his chair, the city skyline stretching beyond his office windows. For a moment, he considered throwing the invitation away, pretending it had never reached him. But the idea of Olivia thinking he was avoiding her burned more than the thought of facing her. He was not a man who allowed anyone to write the story. For him, if he went, he would not show up alone. He would show up with someone who would make her question every choice she had ever made. The idea stayed with him as he left the office that evening, his polished shoes tapping against the marble lobby floor. The air outside carried the chill of early winter, and the streets shimmered with the glow of restaurants preparing for the dinner rush. He was halfway to his car when movement on the sidewalk caught his eye. A young woman sat cross-legged near the entrance of a bustling bistro. She was wrapped in a worn jacket, her hair a tangle around her face, but her posture was upright, her gaze steady. She wasn't looking at the passers-by with pleading eyes like so many in her situation. She watched them as if she were the one deciding whether they were worth her time. Intrigued despite himself, William slowed his steps. She didn't avert her eyes when he stopped in front of her. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, the corner of her mouth lifting in something that was not quite a smile. "Need money?" he asked, his hands sliding casually into his pockets. Her voice, when it came, was calm, but edged with something sharp. "What is this? You toss me a coin if I say yes, or walk away if I say no." No one spoke to him like that. It was almost refreshing. "I have a different offer," he said. "Come with me to an event. One night. I'll pay you enough to change your life." She let out a quiet chuckle, shaking her head. "Enough to change my life? Do you always lead with lines like that? Or just when you want to feel like some kind of savior?" "You'd only need to dress up, smile, and stand beside me," he replied, keeping his voice even. She studied him for a long moment, her eyes flickering with something unreadable. "So you want me to be your decorative doll for the night? If you don't want the offer, I'll find someone else." This time, she laughed out loud. "Is this a joke? Because I don't see a line of candidates forming right here on the sidewalk." She stood, dusted off her clothes, and stepped closer until he could see the defiance in her eyes. "I'll accept, but only because I'm curious." He raised an eyebrow. "Curious about what?" Her lips curved into a slow, almost dangerous smile. "To see how far a man like you is willing to go." Asterisk, asterisk. The following afternoon, William Lancaster's car pulled up in front of a building that gleamed like a jewel in the pale winter sunlight. The facade was glass and gold, a silent declaration that only the wealthy passed through its doors. Inside, a scent of expensive hair products and rare perfumes floated in the air. William stepped out first, his tailored charcoal suit catching the light, then turned toward the woman, climbing slowly from the passenger seat. Isabella. If her clothes the night before had been worn and tired, today she was simply understated jeans that had lost their color, a sweater too thin for the weather, and boots that had seen better days. But her posture was unchanged, straight, proud, and completely unafraid. Her hair fell in loose waves down her shoulders, wild and unbrushed, but somehow framing her face in a way that made her impossible to ignore. He didn't speak as he led her toward the entrance. She didn't ask where they were going. There was something about that silence calm, not tense, that unsettled him more than any barrage of questions would have. Most people in her position would have been overwhelmed already. Isabella seemed immune to it all the moment they stepped inside. A team of stylists swept forward as if William's arrival had triggered an unspoken command. "Mr. Lancaster," the manager said warmly, "what can we do for you today?" He glanced briefly at Isabella, then back at the staff. Everything: hair, makeup, nails, wardrobe. She walks out of here looking like she was born into this world. The words might have sounded like an insult, but he delivered them with a crisp authority that left no room for argument. The stylists nodded and immediately began moving around Isabella. She stood still, looking neither excited nor intimidated. One of the women gestured toward a sleek black styling chair. Isabella glanced at William once, a flicker of amusement crossing her face, before lowering herself into the seat. "If you want to change your mind, now's the time," she said, her tone teasing. "Change my mind about what? About me? I thought you might want someone more impressionable." He crossed his arms, his eyes narrowing. "Are you not impressed by any of this?" "Not really," she said, closing her eyes as warm water streamed over her hair. "I've been in this world before." The words slid between them like a blade. He wanted to press her how, when, why, but before he could speak, one of the stylists politely herded him toward a waiting area. "We'll need a few hours," she told him with a bright, professional smile. Hours. He spent them scrolling through his phone without reading a word, sipping coffee without tasting it, and watching every man and woman who entered the salon, as if they might be connected to her somehow. Something about Isabella's casual admission lingered in his mind. She had said it without hesitation, without drama, like someone telling the truth they had no reason to hide. And yet, the rest of her words had been smoke obscuring rather than clarifying. When the manager finally returned, William rose instantly. "She's ready," the woman said, gesturing for him to follow. He stepped into the private styling suite and froze. The Isabella who stood before him bore no resemblance to the woman on the sidewalk yesterday. Her hair was a cascade of dark silk, shining under the recessed lights. Her skin glowed, her eyes sharpened by makeup that seemed to catch the smallest glint of gold. The dress she wore was fitted, without being provocative, a deep emerald green. That set off her coloring, the kind of fabric that whispered wealth before anyone spoke a word. The heels added height, making her posture even more regal. But the real shock wasn't her beauty, it was her expression. She wasn't stunned by the transformation. She wasn't shy. She was looking at her reflection, like someone reacquainting herself with an old friend. "You don't look surprised," he said. She met his gaze through the mirror, a slow smile curving her lips. "That's because I'm not." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Who are you, Isabella?" She picked up the small clutch a stylist handed her, turning toward him with that same calm, mysterious glint in her eyes. Someone who knows how to seize a good opportunity when it comes. Outside, the driver opened the car door, and she stepped in without waiting for him. William followed, a knot of curiosity tightening in his chest. The drive to the wedding was silent, the city lights flashing over her face as she gazed out the window. Not a hint of nerves. Not a single question. "You don't even want to know where we're going?" he asked finally. "Someplace expensive," she murmured, her lips curving in a faint smirk. "Should I be curious?" He turned to study her. Most people would be. She tilted her head, eyes still on the passing streets. "You found me on the street and offered me money to be your date. That's already strange enough. But I doubt you're planning to sell me into anything criminal." Her words might have been playful, but the way she said them was sharp enough to remind him this woman wasn't walking into his world blind. He leaned back in his seat, realizing something. That sent a ripple of unease down his spine. She might not have been the one pulled into his game. He might have just stepped into hers. The car slowed as they approached the venue, its glass facade shimmering beneath a sky streaked with violet and gold. Outside, the air buzzed with the low hum of expensive engines and the chatter of the city's most powerful names. Photographers clustered at the entrance, their cameras flashing in bursts that lit up the polished marble steps. Guests stepped out of limousines draped in couture, their diamonds catching the light like shards of ice. William stepped out first, his black suit cut to perfection, the faintest glint of silver at his cufflinks. He turned and extended his hand. Isabella placed hers in his without hesitation, her long emerald dress hugging her figure in a way that made heads turn before she'd even reached the pavement. She didn't glance at the flashing cameras, didn't blink at the murmurs that rippled through the crowd. Her chin lifted slightly, her lips curving in a smile that wasn't showy but dangerous, like a queen surveying territory she already owned. They walked together toward the grand double doors, the deep red carpet beneath their feet. A woman in a champagne-colored gown paused mid-step, eyes flicking over Isabella with thinly veiled curiosity. A man in a velvet dinner jacket leaned in to whisper something to his companion, their gaze following the pair as they entered. Inside, the ballroom glittered under the light of crystal chandeliers. Polished mahogany floors gleamed, and every table was crowned with arrangements of pale roses and orchids. A string quartet played softly in the corner, the notes weaving through the low hum of conversation. The scent of expensive perfume and champagne lingered in the air like a signature. William's gaze moved instantly toward the center of the room. Olivia Harrington stood beside her fiancé, Charles Montrose. She was the picture of society, elegance white. Silk gown, hair styled in soft waves, a diamond necklace that caught the chandelier light with every breath she took. But when her eyes found William, her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. And then she saw Isabella. The pause was longer this time, her gaze sweeping from Isabella's dark waves to the precise tilt of her chin. A flicker of something passed over Olivia's face. Confusion, recognition, discomfort. William caught it, and satisfaction twisted low in his chest. He led Isabella directly toward them. "Olivia," he said, his voice smooth but without warmth. She regained her composure, that polished smile snapping back into place. "William, what a surprise. I didn't expect you to come." "Of course I came," he said, glancing briefly at Isabella. "And I brought company." Olivia's attention returned to the woman at his side. "We haven't been introduced before." William could speak. Isabella extended her hand. "Isabella, a pleasure to meet you." Her voice was velvet with an undercurrent of steel. Olivia's fingers touched hers briefly. "You look familiar." "Do I?" Isabella's smile didn't reach her eyes. Charles cleared his throat, sensing the tension. "Shall we toast?" He lifted his champagne glass. William reached for his own, but Isabella spoke first. "I hope you'll be very happy. Marriage is a serious commitment. I was once engaged myself." William's fingers tightened on his glass. Olivia's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Really?" she asked, her tone light but edged. "It didn't work out," Isabella said, taking a sip of champagne. "My fiancé decided I wasn't the right choice for his family." For a moment, the air between the four of them felt like glass clear, brittle, ready to shatter. William caught the sharp look Olivia threw him, but Isabella was already smiling again, as if nothing had been said. "Would you like to dance?" Isabella asked William suddenly, turning to him with that same unreadable expression. He hesitated, caught off guard. "Dance? Or would you rather stay here and watch your ex try to place me in her memory? A low laugh escaped him. Let's dance. As they moved onto the floor, the quartet shifted to a slow, lilting melody. William's hand rested against the curve of her back, guiding her effortlessly through the steps. He searched her face, but her composure was flawless, her eyes calm and bright under the chandelier light. You did that on purpose, he murmured. Didn't I tell you I've been in this world before? His grip on her waist tightened slightly. And I still don't know how. Maybe that's the point. Around them, the ballroom glittered, but William's focus stayed on her, his mind looping back to Olivia's reaction, the way her smile had cracked. Whoever Isabella was, she had walked into this room knowing exactly which strings to pull, and she'd pulled them without hesitation. For the first time that night, William wondered if he had brought her here to make a statement to Olivia, or if Isabella had accepted to make a statement of her own. Asterisk, asterisk, the music faded into the background as William guided Isabella from the dance floor, his mind turning over everything he had just witnessed. Olivia's reaction hadn't been simple. Surprise, it had been sharp, like a blade catching the light. He'd spent years reading people in boardrooms, and he knew when someone was rattled. Tonight, Olivia wasn't just rattled. She was threatened. Isabella didn't seem to notice, or perhaps she didn't care. She walked with him toward the marble staircase that led to the balcony level, her gown flowing behind her like a stream of midnight silk. She paused at the edge, looking down at the sea of glittering guests, her gaze sweeping over them like someone cataloging every face for future use. You've been here before, William said, his voice low. In a place like this? She replied without looking at him. Yes, many times. Yet you were sitting on a sidewalk yesterday. She finally turned to face him, her eyes locking onto his. Life changes quickly when people decide they want you gone. Before he could push further, a flash of movement caught his eye. Olivia stood near the bar, speaking in a low voice to a man William didn't recognize. Sharp suit, narrow eyes, the kind of man who handled things quietly and off the record. When Olivia noticed William watching, she placed a perfectly polite smile on her face and lifted her glass in a mocking toast before turning away. William's jaw tightened. He didn't like games he wasn't controlling. Later that night, long after the final champagne toast and polite goodbyes, William sat in the back of his car, the city lights sliding over his face as he pulled out his phone. He scrolled to a contact he hadn't called in years. Lancaster. A gravelly voice answered on the second ring. I need you to find someone for me. Name's Isabella. No last name. There was a pause. That's unusual. She's unusual. Find everything. Where she came from, who she's connected to, and why she acts like she owns every room she walks into. Give me 48 hours. When the line went dead, William closed his eyes and leaned back, his thoughts tangled between suspicion and a strange, reluctant admiration. 2 days later, his phone rang. The same gravelly voice spoke without preamble. You were? Right, she's not who she says she is. Real name, Isabella Dio. Ring any bells? The name hit William like a glass of ice water. Richard Dio had once been one of the most respected construction magnates in the country, until his empire collapsed in scandal. The Dio scandal was years ago, William said slowly. Yeah, and guess who was right in the middle of it? Olivia Harrington. William didn't reply. He didn't need to. The pieces were already sliding into place in his mind. That night, he went straight to the hotel suite he'd booked for Isabella. She opened the door in bare feet and a simple silk robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. If his sudden arrival surprised her, she didn't show it. You've been busy, she said, and you've been lying. Her expression didn't falter, but her eyes hardened slightly. I never told you who I was. You're Isabella Dio. Your father was Richard Dio. Olivia Harrington helped destroy him. Silence stretched between them, the hum of the city. Seeping in through the window. My father trusted the wrong people, she said finally. They gutted his company, pinned their crimes on him, and left him to burn. Olivia was at the center of it all. She smiled at him in public while she destroyed him in private. And you? I lost everything. Home, family, my father's name. I've been waiting for the chance to face her again. William stepped closer, his voice sharpening. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know if you were going to help me. Or use me. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, William understood something unsettling. This wasn't a coincidence. She hadn't just accepted his offer out of curiosity. She had walked into his life with a purpose, and he wasn't sure if he was her partner or her next move. The morning sun filtered through William's office windows, streaking the polished mahogany desk in gold, but the warmth did nothing to calm the tension simmering inside him. He was halfway through reading a quarterly report when his phone buzzed. It wasn't the ringtone for his usual contacts. It was the private one he used for matters that required discretion. He answered instantly. Lancaster. The voice on the other end was low, urgent. You need to know something. Olivia Harrington has made her move. She's digging, and she's digging deep. Not just into Isabella's past, into her present. She's got lawyers and media contacts lining up. The first wave hits tomorrow. William's jaw tightened. What is she planning? Smear campaign. They'll paint Isabella as a fraud, a social climber who's latched onto you for money and revenge. They're pulling photos from years ago, twisting facts, twisting the Dio scandal to make her look complicit. He hung up without a goodbye, his pulse steady but colder than ice. This wasn't just an attack on Isabella. It was a calculated move to break her before she could retaliate. By the time he reached Isabella's hotel suite, his stride was sharp, each step a measure of restrained fury. She opened the door barefoot, a book in her hand, her expression calm until she saw his face. She started, he said, his voice clipped. Olivia? Front page by morning. For a long moment, Isabella just leaned against the doorframe, studying him. I've been waiting for this. Her calm infuriated him. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, she cut in. I know exactly what she's doing, and I know exactly how far she's willing to go. I've been living with her shadow over me for years, William. Do you think I scare that easily? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. This is different. Now she's using my name to legitimize her lies. That means she's drawing me into the war, whether I like it or not. Then stop pretending you don't want to fight back. Something in her tone, a quiet, steely challenge, hit him harder than he expected. For a moment, they stood in silence, the hum of the city the only sound between them. That night, the first headlines dropped online. By morning, tabloids blared her name. Isabella Dio, from high society to street con artist. Old photos appeared beside fabricated stories. Anonymous sources claiming she'd been seen manipulating wealthy men, using her looks to survive. The narrative was brutal, and it was everywhere. Williams sat across from her at the suite's small table, a steaming mug of coffee in his hands. She's trying to bury you alive. Isabella's eyes were steady, her fingers wrapped around her own untouched cup. Then we dig her up with the truth. He arched an eyebrow. You have proof? She leaned back slightly. Not everything, but enough to lead us to what we need. My father kept records, contracts, correspondence. Some of it survived after the collapse. It's not in my possession, but I know where to start looking. And you're telling me this now? I wasn't sure if I could trust you. He gave a short, humorless laugh. After last night, you still weren't sure? Her lips curved into a faint smile. "I've learned the hard way that trust isn't given. It's earned." By late afternoon, William had arranged a private meeting in one of his less conspicuous properties, a minimalist loft far from the watchful eyes of the press. Isabella arrived in a dark coat, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She carried a thin, leather folder that looked older than either of them. Inside were copies of documents, transaction records, handwritten notes, corporate memos. Each one hinted at the same thing: Olivia had orchestrated the fraudulent deals that destroyed the DO empire. But she had used intermediaries to keep her own hands clean. "It's not enough to take her down," William said after scanning them. "It's enough to get us to the people who can give us the rest," Isabella replied. "Olivia's enemies in business. She has more than she thinks." That was the moment William realized they were no longer on the defensive. Isabella wasn't just surviving this, she was steering it. Her calm wasn't indifference. It was strategy. But strategy cut both ways. As night fell, they sat in the dim loft, the city glittering beyond the windows. William leaned forward, his forearms resting on his knees. "If we do this, there's no going back. She come at you harder. She come at me harder." Isabella's gaze didn't waver. "She already has. The only question is, are you ready to go further than she is?" His answer came without hesitation. "Always." And in that quiet, uncheckable moment, the war officially began. The Harrington Club loomed ahead like a fortress of glass and steel, its entrance lined with black-clad doormen and luxury cars gleaming under the floodlights. The building itself was an unspoken declaration of power. Membership here was as much about influence as it was about money, and Olivia Harrington had ruled these halls for years. Tonight, she had invited Isabella here with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and a tone that dripped with mock civility. William didn't like it. Every instinct told him it was a trap. He had argued for hours, pacing Isabella's hotel suite, like a man trying to hold back a storm, but she had been unmoved. "This is my moment," she'd said simply, slipping into a black dress that shimmered like spilled ink. "I'm not running anymore." Now, standing just beyond the club's arched doors, William scanned the crowd spilling into the grand lobby. Men in tailored suits and women in floor-length gowns clustered in small groups, their laughter low, their conversations hushed but deliberate. Everyone here knew the weight of their own power. Everyone here understood the stakes. Isabella stepped out of the car, the black silk of her gown catching the light like a living shadow. A diamond cuff at her wrist gleamed with each movement, and her hair fell in loose waves, framing her face with deceptive softness. She walked ahead of William, unhurried, as though she owned the very air she breathed. People turned to look, not just because she was beautiful, but because there was something in her bearing that made them pause. Trying to place her. Inside, the Harrington Club was a study in quiet opulence. A crystal chandelier, the size of a small car, hung above the marble foyer, and the scent of aged whiskey and expensive perfume curled through the air. Olivia stood near the center of the room, speaking to a group of high-profile guests, her gown a deep crimson that matched the flush of her perfectly painted lips. When she saw Isabella, her smile froze for the briefest second before settling back into place. "Isabella?" she said as they drew closer, her voice warm enough for the room to hear, yet sharp enough for Isabella to feel. "I'm so glad you accepted my invitation." "You didn't give me much choice," Isabella replied smoothly, accepting a flute of champagne from a passing waiter without breaking eye contact. Olivia tilted her head, feigning curiosity. "I hope you've enjoyed all the attention you've been getting lately." "The media certainly has." "I've gotten used to being the center of attention," Isabella said, her tone edged with a smile. "It's something you've always wanted, hasn't it?" For just a heartbeat, Olivia's eyes flashed with anger before the mask slipped back into place. Careful, dear. Attention is a double-edged sword. Before Isabella could respond, William stepped forward. Speaking of swords, he said, his voice carrying just enough to make nearby conversations falter, it's time we cut to the point. He reached into his inside pocket and withdrew a thick sealed envelope. Olivia's brows arched, but she accepted it without hesitation, sliding one manicured nail under the seal. As she read the first page, the color drained from her face. Her grip on the paper tightened, and for a moment, the clink of champagne glasses and murmur of conversation seemed to fade into silence. These are fabrications, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. No, William replied, his tone cool. These are copies. The originals are in the hands of several people who will make sure they see daylight if anything happens to Isabella or to me. The pages in her hands were a dossier of damning evidence. Forged contracts, offshore account transfers, recorded. Calls in which she ordered subordinates to frame Richard Dio for embezzlement. The paper trail was complete, unbroken, and undeniable. This is fake, Olivia tried again, but her voice had lost its steadiness. It's over, Isabella said, softly, stepping closer so only Olivia could hear. Tomorrow morning, this will be on every front page. Your name will be mud. Your allies will scatter. Your empire will crumble. And you'll know exactly what it feels like to lose everything. Olivia's lips trembled as she opened her mouth to retort, but the sound of heavy footsteps cut her off. Two uniformed police officers entered the room, flanking a stern-faced prosecutor. Conversation stopped entirely as the prosecutor's voice rang out. Olivia Harrington, you are under arrest for financial fraud, embezzlement, and market manipulation. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Olivia let out a short, brittle laugh. You can't be serious. I am Olivia Harrington. And now, Isabella said, her voice low but carrying, you're also a criminal. The officers moved in, their handcuffs gleaming under the chandelier's light. Olivia turned to William, desperation breaking through her carefully curated composure. Say something, she pleaded. William met her gaze with a cold finality. Your only mistake was thinking you'd never get caught. The cuffs clicked, shut, and the sound echoed in the stunned silence. Olivia's eyes found Isabella one last time, burning with hatred. This isn't over, she spat as the officers led her toward the door. Yes, it is, Isabella replied without blinking. The great doors of the Harrington Club swung open, spilling cold night air into the room as Olivia Harrington, once untouchable, was led out into the waiting dark. Around them, the elite whispered. Behind jeweled hands, and photographers outside began their feeding frenzy. William and Isabella stood side by side, silent amid the chaos, the weight of victory settling between them. But even in triumph, William knew this was only the end of one war. And as he glanced at Isabella, her eyes fixed on the doors where Olivia had disappeared, he realized she knew it too. The night after Olivia's arrest, the city's headlines burned with her downfall. Every news channel replayed the same footage. Olivia Harrington, once the untouchable queen of high society, being led out of the Harrington Club in handcuffs, her face pale under the camera flashes. The scandal was a feeding frenzy, her empire collapsing faster than even Isabella had imagined. In William's penthouse, the victory felt both electric and heavy. Isabella sat curled on the leather sofa, her bare feet tucked beneath her, staring out at the sprawling city lights. A black dress from the night before was gone, replaced by one of William's crisp white shirts that hung loosely on her frame. She wasn't smiling, even though they'd won. You should be celebrating, William said quietly from the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of red wine. I don't celebrate ashes, she replied without looking at him. This isn't over. The truth is out, but the damage Olivia caused, it doesn't vanish in a night. He walked over, placing the glass in her hand. Then we rebuild, starting with you. She glanced at him, a flicker of something unguarded in her eyes. And what does that mean? William sat across from her, leaning forward. It means you stop surviving and start living. You've spent years fighting for your father's name. You've got it back. Now it's time to put your name on something of your own. That was when he slid a folder across the coffee table. Inside was a full business proposal. A strategic investment and consulting firm, Dio Consulting. Her name was on every page. This is in my name? She asked, her voice low. Yes, William said. Your independence, your vision. I'll fund it, but it's yours. You call the shots. She hesitated, fingers brushing the cover. I don't take charity, William. It's not charity, he said firmly. It's a partnership. You have the mind for this. I've seen it. You can walk into a room of people who think they own the world and make them feel like guests. A slow, almost disbelieving smile curved her lips. You make it sound like I'm dangerous. You are, he said without missing a beat. Next 3 months were a blur of controlled chaos. Dio Consulting was born in a sleek downtown office, and Isabella threw herself into building it, hiring sharp young analysts, reconnecting with former allies of her father, and signing her first major contracts. William was there every step of the way, not as a shadow, but as a constant presence. He handled introductions she didn't yet have, and quietly shut down anyone who tried to sabotage her rise. But in the spaces between boardrooms and strategy meetings, something else was growing. He would show up with her favorite coffee in the mornings, tease her about working too late, or pull her away for a quiet dinner when she was about to burn out. She would catch herself watching him across a table, wondering how a man who once seemed made of marble could look at her like she was the only real thing in the room. One rainy night, long after the staff had gone home, Isabella was still at her desk when William appeared in the doorway. You've been at this for 12 hours, he said. I've been at this for years, she replied without looking up. He stepped into the office, dropping a small box on her desk. Open it. Inside was a silver keychain, the letter I engraved in sleek, modern lines. For your office keys, he said simply. The first of many. She closed her fingers around it, something tightening in her chest. Why do you keep doing this? She asked softly. Because I'm not done earning your trust, he said. And because I'm not giving up. The air between them shifted, thick with something unspoken. She wanted to tell him not to wait for her, but the words wouldn't come. Weeks later, she found herself standing in the sand of a secluded beach. William had insisted on taking her away for a weekend. No phones, no meetings, just the sound of waves and the smell of salt in the air. They walked along the shoreline until the sun began to set, staining the horizon in shades of fire and gold. Stopped suddenly, turning to face her, the wind tugging at his hair. Before I met you, I was arrogant, obsessed with winning for the sake of winning. You made me see there's more to life than that. She held his gaze, her heartbeat unsteady. I love you, Isabella, he said, his voice low but unwavering. I want to do this the right way, with respect, with patience, and with all my heart. When he dropped to one knee and opened the small velvet box, her breath caught. The diamond inside caught the dying light, throwing sparks across the sand. Will you marry me? Her answer was immediate. Yes. The wedding was private, a sunlit ceremony on a cliffside overlooking the ocean. Friends and allies watched as they exchanged vows, their hands steady, their eyes locked. When William kissed her, it felt like the closing of one life and the beginning of another. Months later, Isabella stood in their kitchen, holding an ultrasound printout in trembling hands. She had waited for him to come home before saying anything. When he walked in, she placed it in his palm without a word. His eyes widened. "Isabella?" She smiled through tears. "We're having twins." For a long moment, he just stared at her, then pulled her into his arms, laughing against her hair. "We built our empire," he whispered. "Now we build our family." And for the first time in years, she let herself believe there would be no more running, only living.